Okay.
Julieta, can you turn?
I still cannot turn on. I don't hear anything.
Mute.
Yet I cannot
Don't hear anything.
I'm now unmuted, and the host will make sure that whoever is talking will be on video. So welcome everybody to the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung organized debate between two wonderful women, Sonja Licht and Julieta Mrzkolaj. This is a debate about the future of dialogue, women promoting peace. And the discussions today are going to be led, for those that don't know, Sonja Licht was head of Soros Foundation for a long time. Today she runs Foreign Policy Council at the Serbian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, civil rights activist for a long time. Julieta Mrzkolaj, former member of Constitutional Court in Kosovo, a lawyer and an expert on constitutional issues who teaches at University of Pristina. I will now, to frame the debate, introduce the opening remarks from Eva Eller-Wright. Eva's name I'm learning to pronounce right. She is the FES Kosovo acting country director. Eva, it's your floor.
Thank you very much, Jeta. It's a pleasure to be here, and the pronunciation was excellent of my name. I would like to use the opportunity to welcome you all on behalf of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. As Jeta already said, I am the current acting director of the office in Pristina. My colleague Max Brendle, who is the director of our office in Belgrade, can't be here today. But with us in this conversation are also Ivana Racic and Jeta Lošak, the coordinators who are working on this project and responsible for bringing this together. Thank you very much for being here. We're really delighted to have such special and really excellent experts in the field here with us today, and I really look forward to this discussion. Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, for those of you who may not know, is a German political foundation, and you've probably all interacted with us at some point, or our partners that have participated in events, and you know that we are working in the region for many years, for over 20 years, actually, in most of the offices around the Western Balkans and around the world. And as a political foundation, we work on democracy, on EU integration, on fostering social dialogue, but also on peace and security in the region. And in that regard, the topic of the dialogue is, of course, very important also to us. But I think, for many people, the dialogue sometimes seems like a chronic disease and sometimes like the only cure of problems. It switches back and forth. And we decided with this activity and this series of debates to focus on different topics that the two societies, that are relevant to both societies, to the different contexts, in fact, relevant, quite frankly, to the entire Western Balkans. And in that way, to facilitate more dialogue between the civil societies, but also to shed light on pressing issues and move forward constructive discussions, not only among experts, but really among key stakeholders. We have in the past already spoken about the topic of air quality, and today we focus on the broader issue of women promoting peace. And I think we couldn't have found better people to participate in this debate in, and I really look forward to hearing more about your perspectives on this issue. It is a widely known fact that women have oftentimes, globally, in fact, been underrepresented in peace processes, and at the same time been key stakeholders in those processes, and oftentimes, of course, victims within conflict. But in a broader perspective, not only speaking about war and conflict, but really speaking about dialogue and peace, it is quite important to break open the old lines of unconstructive debates and really introduce new thinking and a new sense of trying to find a way forward. And in doing so, usually it is really important to have a more diverse set of heads around all the tables where dialogue happens, and certainly to have a more gender equal perspective and more women involved as well. I really look forward to this debate, and once more, thank you very much for participating. We hope this is an interesting format for you. We look forward to the discussions that it will spark. And now I would like to give the floor back to our wonderful moderator. Thank you very much for moderating this discussion here today. And I think we can open the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. It's a pleasure to moderate this discussion. And now I let Julieta Moshkolai first, actually. She's got her first 10 minutes in the agenda. And let me just specify that we are going to focus on two sub-themes today. Women participation in political decision-making in Belgrade-Pristina dialogue specifically. And the last minutes, the second part of the debate, we want to concentrate on the current and future status of the dialogue, incentives to include women in the negotiation process. And I just want to make a remark that women like yourselves don't just deserve to talk about this, but be part of the dialogue, not because they're women, but because we have such quality in the institutional memory of women being involved in dialogue for the last 2-3 decades, rather than asking to be involved just because they're women. So this is very important as a framework to this debate. Julieta, your first 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today and to discuss such an important issue that affects all of us, the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue facilitated, or better saying, mediated by EU. Since the call for restarting the dialogue again this year, actually in a few days or weeks, we have witnessed many groups criticizing the fact that even now the dialogue is not inclusive enough. There is no proper participation of women in the dialogue, and participation and representation are both important factors that are missing in this dialogue. On top of this, whenever we think of Europe, EU, we think of an organization that is that considers gender equality as an important factor. If we read all the reports that come from EU, we will see that according to EU, gender equality is the top priority for EU. But when we see how Europe facilitates the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia, we don't see that inclusiveness is a priority. It is maybe a priority only verbally, but in practice, we don't see that it is a priority. And if we think of the fact that even the topics included to be negotiated between Kosovo and Serbia, we don't see that gender inclusiveness is an important part of the dialogue. Of course, during armed conflict, there might be maybe some kind of arguments that it is important for the parties to the conflict, and the conflicts are normally masculine. Maybe it's important only the two parties to take part in the negotiation, in the peace processes, because it is easier to stop the conflict. However, now the armed conflict is behind us. We all hope that it will never come back again. And the normalization process cannot really go forward if it's not gender inclusive. Why it cannot go forward? Because what is important, not only because both countries are going through different normative changes. Kosovo, at least, has become one of the countries that does respect gender equality. However, at least on paper, even though we still face very drastic discrimination, on the other hand, and Serbia too is going through the same normative process of gender equality. So not only that we have this kind of normative arguments for a more inclusive process of the dialogue, but we also have very practical reasons why inclusiveness is very important. Not only women, but also youth and all other civil society actors. It is important because only an inclusive dialogue can legitimize the process, but also this is the only way to gain public support for this process of negotiating process. We are seeing these days that the government during the preparations for negotiations in Brussels is very much focused on including the opposition parliamentary parties. But we haven't seen that the government is approaching properly civil society. Why? I'm not saying that is not approaching civil society, but is not approaching properly civil society. We have seen that there is a civil society organization that has received funding from Norway to facilitate the inclusiveness of civil society in the process. Unfortunately, we have seen names, but we have seen only men being proposed to take part in the process. We haven't heard a single name of a woman. And I would like to stress that Kosovo Women's Network did send an open letter to LIJAC mentioning this very fact. why it is important to include women, because women have struggled a lot since the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. Kosovo women's groups have really worked a lot and tirelessly to include women in the peace process. They have worked in both ways to include women in peace process, but also to recognize the importance of including women. The struggle has been very difficult. If we just think in the past how difficult the process was, especially to include the victims of rape into the pension scheme, the ugly debate in the parliament trying not to include them, and the importance of involvement at that time of the president of Kosovo, who was a woman, former President Yahyaga, and her effort in setting up the National Council for Victims of Sexual Violence. The whole process and the involvement of the president of Kosovo showed us how important is the representation of women, but also how important it is not to consider that representation is enough. So representation and participation, we should remember that still are two different things. Both of them are important. So in order to have a real inclusive process, we should have both representation, and I would like again to stress the report of Kosovo Women's Network entitled A Place at the Table, I think, but also proper representation. And I believe that if our government does not recognize the importance of inclusiveness of different actors in the negotiation process, and focusing only on participation of the opposition political parties, even though they are important. However, the legitimacy, not only that for our government is very important to include women because of legal requirements, also to make the whole process more legitimate, to gain public support, the process must be inclusive, and also it is important that also representation of women is very important. I believe that the government has now all the possibilities to gain public support. Especially, it is important to remember that just the very fact that very important and active women have joined our political party that is in position, that holds the government now, Vetëvendosje, especially being part of the process of Vasvije Krasniqi, who was very important to show how important it is for women to be part of the process, makes the government more legitimate, could make the whole process more supportive by the public. This is all for the beginning, and I would appreciate to have to answer questions and to take part in the dialogue. We cannot hear you, Jeta.
No, we do.
So after the first part, I will allow question and answers from one session of question and answer from participants if they have any, after Sonia speaks. Sonia, your first 10 minutes.
Thank you, Jeta, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. Although I have a small correction to make. I'm the president of Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence, and I was the chair of the advisory board of the Council on Foreign Relations until 2012. So that's just a very small correction. I would like also to thank the organizers to put this very, I would say, burning issue on the agenda. It's important, I agree with you, Leta, but it's also very burning because, in fact, I do not believe that we will be able, as two societies, to achieve a positive peace without including women in a really serious way in participation of the dialogue. When I mention positive peace, I just want to underline that this is a concept that was developed by the father of peace research, a Norwegian, very important Norwegian academic, Johan Galtung. And in fact, when you look at the content of this concept, you can see that it can't be realized without women, because sustainable development, equality, inclusiveness, etc. We would, of course, also add today green development, fighting energy poverty, etc. can't be done without women. And without a positive peace, every agreement will be, well, partially implementable and will have partial results. If you allow me, I would just try to remember two initiatives and to mention here two initiatives that I think are a proof how important women are in these processes. The one was happening in the 90s in the center of Pristina in a well-known pizzeria. The owner was a woman, and this was the place where women from both Serbian and Albanian community of Kosovo were coming together. And I don't think many people remember this effort. It was initiated by Nijaz Maculja and Ava Kurteshi from Pristina and Jelena Vlajković from Belgrade. And the important thing I learned during this process was that women were in fact addressing three major issues. One was how to place themselves in a traditionalist patriarchal concept as equals. Second, how to empower themselves to really be part of societal processes. And third, how to become agents of change. Now, that was possible in the 90s, and we know how tremendously difficult the situation was there. Why wouldn't it be possible now? The second example I want to mention is the Budva process from January 2012, when women politicians, mainly parliamentarians, not only, were involved in a dialogue. It was renamed by the participants Follow Us process. And I do remember very well that at the panel at the Berlin Process Summit in 2015 in Vienna, in front of a full room, they were presenting their own dialogue process. They were presenting the need why women must be part of the big dialogue. And I also remember that the British ambassador to Vienna stood up and said, "This is fascinating. Could you, ladies, please travel the world and tell about your experience?" Unfortunately, the follow-us process is not on any longer, but definitely, I think there are enough women, as we heard also from Giulietta, enough strong women who could, in a substantial way, participate in the dialogue on the technical levels as well as on political levels. So my opinion is that this is really the right time. I congratulate the women of Kosovo who decided to take action. And I would also like to underline that the UN Resolution 1325, in fact, is a resolution on women, peace, and security, is a resolution that makes all our societies, all our countries, in fact, obliged to take it seriously. And by the way, in Serbia, the Serbian government in 2010 accepted this resolution and its own national action plan as its own document. I never heard that anybody questioned it from then on. It's true that I'm afraid we are lagging behind actual national action plans, but yes, the obligation to the UN is there, the obligation to the international community, and I dare to underline, first and foremost, the obligation to our own societies. I never believed and do not believe that genuine peace process can succeed without the societies being part and parcel of it. And of course, women are, let us not forget, a little bit more than 50% of those societies. I'm, of course, glad to participate on and to answer questions if there will be any.
Yes. Thank you for this input. For me, the first observation is rather ironic a little bit when you think that we are at a phase, our countries are at a phase where we have a Serbian woman prime minister, we have a Kosovan woman president, a Kosovan woman foreign minister. So our governments are certainly aware of the quota and the good image and the good quality in politics that women bring. But yet this hasn't reflected necessarily in the current dialogue. Though, before we move forward, Giulietta, many people regarding Kosovo would say that for years, almost a decade, you had a woman leading the Kosovo team. So it's the obvious question is, Edita Tahiri was somebody who came from Women's Network as her background. We had a woman leading Kosovo team for almost a decade. So what would you say to people, to cynics who would say, did that improve the dialogue much? Is it a proof that if you have a woman, you'll get better deals? What would you say to those cynics?
Well, as I said earlier, it's not only important to be represented by women. It is important to have an inclusive process, to have the participation of women in the process and the participation of civil society. As Sonia mentioned, positive peace is important, not negative peace. It is important, it's not only important to have a ceasefire, it's not only important to have not to have armed conflict. It's important to establish a real, genuine peace. And genuine peace cannot be established without participation of civil society, without gender mainstreaming, and without a proper inclusive process. So yes, you are right. We have had the process led by Edita Tahiri, but who was very respected woman, negotiator. However, at that time, it was not enough space even for her to represent women properly, because even in a normative way, we did not have everything settled on the ground. For example, in that period of time, we had, you all remember, for example, the language used by our members of the parliament when the issue of including raped women as beneficiaries of pensions was discussed. At that time, it was not possible for women to participate fully in the process, even though we had a woman negotiator, a woman representative at the table. However, representation still is important. And I mentioned, for example, how the process was resolved within the country with great activism of President Yahyogha. I believe that now we have all the prerequisites to properly participate. However, it is important for our government, especially it is important for our Prime Minister to recognize the fact that there is a need for more inclusiveness of the process. And it's not enough to have a woman president. It's not enough to have a woman Minister of Foreign Affairs. It is important to include properly participation of civil society in the process, and within the civil society, proper inclusiveness of women.
Yes. I want to see if there are any questions right now from people attending. There are none, so I want to move for now. There are none in our chat, so I'd like to move to the second part of this discussion, the future status of dialogue. Do we really have to have incentives to include women in the dialogue? Do we have to have international pressure? How do we move from now onwards? Sonia.
Well, I would dare to say that what we are doing today is also a small step in the right direction. So I would start when you ask Jetta about international pressure. I think what is really seriously important is internal pressure. So this is where the women organizations, the women in the parliament, the women in the executive, in all other places that they can be heard, and then they have some kind of public access and power, need to come together. It looks like as an utopia, I know, for the time being, but it is not always utopia. It really depends on the bottom-up pressure, in my opinion, on, in fact, concentration on main issues that both the dialogue have to include, but also that will be a result of the dialogue. Mm-hmm. Again, I will mention development, sustainable development, green economy, women's problems, for example, with energy, poverty. So if we discuss energy in the dialogue, then it is again about women. if they discuss the ways how missing persons will be treated, it is also about the women. So women, as Giulietta said, both represented and participated. In fact, I think that the most important issue is to recognize that the whole society has to be involved in order to really have a positive result. Yet I heard this several times. When Ilir Deda was at one of our Belgrade security conferences after the Brussels agreement was reached, he said that he's very worried that it will end up as the Oslo agreement. And I was quite upset. And I told him, Ilir, why are you so negative? Since then, I mentioned him this small story very many times. The main difference, I think, would be really to have the entire society involved. Of course, I'm not that naive that I think that everything can be discussed openly in public and shouldn't. But the main results have to be communicated really as they are, not trying to gain any daily political, but in fact try to achieve a genuine and substantial result. And again, this can't be done without, as Giulietta said, inclusiveness, without women being involved. And I would add here also other minorities, but let us not complicate for the time being.
Yeah. Sonia, before we go to Giulietta, one of the attendees to this discussion is asking, do you know if there are women in the preparation team behind the scenes? I want to know about both delegations clearly. Do you know if there are women involved in preparing the negotiation teams or the material? Are there any women?
As far as I know, and I don't claim I know everything, but what can be basically heard in the media and in different other places, I am not aware that there is any woman included in the negotiation.
Thank you. Giulietta.
If I may answer the question, of course, we cannot say for sure that there are no women outside the government taking part in the preparation of the process. However, if we take into account the public letter issued by Kosovo Women's Network that expressed its concern regarding the engagement of experts, and none of them were women, we can maybe say that there are no women besides those that are part of the government that are taking part in preparation of the process. And this is actually very bad for starting the process. However, and now I would like to start my 10 minutes by expressing my frustration to the European Union and the very fact that even though European Union likes to emphasize the importance of gender mainstreaming, it is part of their strategy, it is part of the enlargement process. It is part of EU being involved in peace processes externally. However, we have not seen that the EU is taking gender inclusiveness, even though we, it means that not only women per se are important, but gender inclusiveness in general is also important. It is really sad to see this approach of European Union, because what normalization process between Kosovo and Serbia means. It means really the realization of so-called positive peace, and we cannot really accomplish that, and EU cannot even present properly itself if does not include gender inclusiveness in this process. Now, one of the important features of the normalization negotiations is the establishment of the Association of Serbian Communities. And I really do not see how it is possible to work on this Association of Municipalities if we are not properly being prepared for municipal elections that are going to take part soon. And elections, municipal elections, are very much substance of the future establishment of association. What we have, if we can learn anything from the previous elections, especially in the Serbian-dominated municipalities, we can see that we did not have there proper free elections, which means that we did not have proper participation and free participation of women living in those municipalities. We had the misuse of elections by the Serbian government, not allowing proper free elections in those areas, and exclusion, complete exclusion of proper non-partisan participation of Serbian women's organizations, not in the north, but also in southern municipalities inhabited especially by Serbs and non-Albanian communities. This means that the EU, we haven't seen any EU report regarding elections and lessons learned from these elections, but we really do need proper support by European Union in organizing free elections, real free elections, also in Serbian inhabited municipalities, because this is the only way to prepare the ground for establishment of association of municipalities inhabited by Serbs. I'm saying this because for free elections, we also need to have non-partisan participation of women's organizations or Serbian women's organization in northern part of Kosovo especially, but also in other parts of Kosovo. So we don't have, while we do count on non-partisan participation of women's organization in Albanian inhabited municipalities, we are not seeing that we have proper possibilities for Serbian women's organization in participating in non-partisan way in elections. So if we do not prepare the ground for proper elections, then we are going to have serious implications for excluding completely women, and especially Serbian women living in Kosovo, from the negotiation process, and especially an important part of the process, which is going to be establishment of the Association of Serbian Inhabited Municipalities. This is my part for the beginning.
Because we have 10 minutes left, I want to read to you two questions coming from Alisa Kockar and Yelica Stefanovic, a professor. Has any of you, does any of you know, so write down the two questions. Does any of you, Sonia or Judieta, know about Follow Us initiative that seemed promising for a few years, not active anymore? Have we learned anything from it? Are we using lessons learned? How? And it's interesting, the second question from Professor Dr. Yelica Stefanovic, who says, should we, since the process has never had female agenda for normalization, do you see the need for addressing eradication of structural violence against women as prerequisite of positive peace? Meaning not only 50-50 participation, but all local communities to reach not a limping solution, but sustainable ones. And I want to add to a precedent to what Professor Yelica is saying, because most of our citizens would find would reject the idea that we address structural violence in the dialogue process. However, when both delegations signed the 4th of September agreement in DC, Mr. Grinnell made sure that there was going to be a paragraph about both societies in Kosovo and Serbia, showing a higher level of tolerance and non-discrimination against LGBT communities. The question is, there was one man, the mediator, who wanted to push this, and both delegations were obliged to sign this. So why shouldn't we make the female agenda for normalization addressing eradication of structural violence as a part of the process? Or would the cynics say you're asking too much? We don't have women involvement, therefore, how can you ask for this?
Can I start with the Follow Us initiative? As I mentioned it already, it was an initiative that brought, first of all, women in the political life, women politicians together, and help them understand each other's concerns. I would say that was the first lesson. They understood better what their colleagues are facing in the other society. That was a very important starting point. The second was, in fact, when they changed the name itself, it had a meaning. They called on the men from their political spectrums to join, to follow them, that they are ready to break prejudices, but they are also ready to break barriers. And again, I give you one example. In 2016, at the Belgrade Security Forum, there was a kind of a problem whether anybody from Kosovo should participate. There was an arrest of a man in south of Serbia. I don't believe that anybody remembers very well the whole episode. One of those episodes when it was said officially that no one should come to the Belgrade Security Forum. Those who came, there was one person, one man, and there was a whole group of women from Follow Us initiative who simply did not obey, but came and talked about their issues and the problems they think they are facing in this whole situation. Interestingly enough, when they went back, no one criticized them. So the women managed to break a barrier. I'm telling this story because I'm deeply convinced, and this I think is the main lesson. If women don't manage to get organized around issues that are important for them. And here we come also to the structural violence in the societies. We can even talk about femicide from time to time. I mean, in Serbia, you have several dozen women every year being killed by their partners.
Mhm.
I am sure Kosovo is also facing a similar problem. We saw also during the COVID-19 how the fact that there was a lockdown and that people had less possibility to move in certain societies, this gender-based violence just went berserk. Also in our region, but not only in our region, even in developed democratic European countries. So obviously there are issues that have to be part of this process of positive peace. Otherwise it won't be sustainable.
Mm.
And again, about the Follow Us initiative, I'm terribly sorry that it stopped. And I think this kind of conversation with all these people who are here to listen and to participate, I think should be one of those incentives sent out to women parliamentarians in the executive, but also in different other institutions, and in the first place, I dare to say, in civil society, academics, who should simply put their act together and try to continue what already existed and does not exist at the moment. We also have to ask ourselves, why not?
Thank you, Sonia, for reminding us of that very controversial Belgrade Security Forum when, yes, indeed, I remember there was a big pressure dilemma whether Kosovo participants should come. And I remember deciding to come, being among those, and it was very interesting. Sonia, sorry, Giulietta, on these two questions, Follow Us initiative and addressing structural violence against women.
Well, I do believe that the negotiating process does need to be inclusive, gender inclusive. So not only to be inclusive regarding participation of women, but all perspective of gender inclusiveness. And also it is important that the product of the negotiation also should include some structural interventions regarding the structural violence, because both society are built in such a way that violence is part of both societies. So the peace agreement that we all believe that should be the result of the negotiations should also include some kind of institutional or structural interventions for the structural violence. Gender-based violence was very much part of the conflict. So we have to deal with it by including all aspects of the violence in order to build structures to intervene in order to facilitate the end of violence in both society. This is the reason why civil society needs to be involved in the process. This is why it is very important that a substantive part of the civil society participation should be women participation in the process. And this is the only way to have the lasting peace, but also to have a proper legitimized process during in this last, I believe, phase of negotiations.
Thank you,
And it
Julieta.
is very important also the EU to be aware of the necessity of including women in the process in both teams.
Thank you, Julieta. Time is up, but I will not leave without putting the last question from a panelist that goes only to Sonja. Dragana Rakic from Democratic Party of Serbia is asking, Sonja, do you think that dialogue with autocrat Vučić is possible? Do you think that Pristina-Belgrade dialogue is possible without previous dialogue in Serbia?
Well, the dialogue in Serbia, to start from that end, is absolutely necessary. And I personally would like to see all the opposition parties to also come out with a platform regarding the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, regarding the outcomes as well. So that's the first point. The second point is that hopefully it would be a much more successful process if we would both live in real democratic orders. Although it is not a guarantee, unfortunately, in this kind of processes. I could name now a few countries, including, for example, Israel, which is being treated as a democratic country, and it has all the democratic institutions, and yet we saw in this last conflict as well that unfortunately it is not yielding the necessary results. By the way, I fully understand the concerns. I have my own, but I must say, who will be participating in the dialogue is not possible to be really influenced by the societies, except when they go to the ballot box. Everything else will be designed according to who won the elections. Of course, the quality of elections is a huge issue, and we know that there is an ongoing now dialogue involving the European parliamentarians. I hope it will bring some results, but again, I really insist that it is very important to have an, yes, internal conversation and not to use anywhere this extremely important process for a political battle, to find a way how to have a genuine normalization and genuine peace between these two societies should be above and beyond anything that is a political struggle within the countries.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I want to just note, Sonja, that thank you for correcting me on your current position. I took it from Wikipedia, which is outdated, about that you're still running the Foreign Policy Council. Anyway, thanks for the correction. Thanks, everybody. It's been a pleasure for me to see two good friends who I enjoy a meeting, let alone formally having to talk to. Thanks to FES for being so proactive in doing something nobody is doing right now. All the focus and the stress is on whether Kosovo will talk to Serbia. And I love the fact that FES turns it around, saying not only that they should talk, but we should, from now on, insist to include women in the dialogue process. So we hope to push this agenda with all the participants and everybody wherever we are in our fields to make this very much a mainstream agenda, not just an off-site Zoom event of women who want to be involved, like yourselves. I think at the very least, both Sonja and Julieta, to my evaluation and many other people in civil society who know them have resources, have intellectual resources among them to be included in the dialogue process. And I'm amazed that even Kosovo, that has right now a project to engage experts in advising the government, funded by international donors, yet none of those advisors are women. I'm amazed. We are talking about this in 2021. It continues to amaze me. And it's amazing that chronology doesn't necessarily mean that things get better. Chronological time passing means that there's less. I find that there's less women involved than there used to be in current time, involved in the dialogue. We hope to change that. Thanks, everybody, and see you in next FES meetings.
Thank you.